Right now, for the main event of the evening, it is my distinct pleasure to bring Ursula Pawel to us tonight. I heard Ursula Pawel speak up at St. Elizabeth some months ago, and she really has been doing a lot of talking. This is her third lecture today. Ursula's book, My Child is Back, was written in the year 2000. It continues to be published, continues to sell briskly, and her talk about her life in the concentration camp, the ingenuity and the skill with which she dealt with the many problems, and the manner in which she traipsed all over Europe and found her mother is a compelling story. Ursula came to the United States in 1947. She married her husband in 1948. He passed away in 2001. Ursula has two sons. One is an MD in Cherry Hill, and one is a statistician in Virginia. Her book is here for sale at the publisher's price of $16.50. I've read the book. It's a terrific book. I urge you to buy it if you're interested in this subject matter. $16.50, it's a steal. It's my pleasure to introduce Ursula Pawel.
I'm going to tell you my story. It starts in Germany. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
My father was a German Jew. My mother came from a Christian family, but she had converted to Judaism when she met my father. They both worked for a very big concern in Germany called Karstadt, which was like Macy's, a department store company. They had department stores all over Germany. My father became the manager of a big department store in a suburb near the city of Dortmund, and my mother was a buyer. And we had a pretty good life until 1933, when Hitler came to power. And something that I have always remembered, because it hurt me. I was only 7 years old, and my best friends, one was the daughter of a physician, the other one was the daughter of the school chief, chancellor of the school. And they told me one day that they weren't allowed to play with me anymore because I was a Jew. I'm not sure it really penetrated what that meant. I think that was the beginning of the persecution for me in Germany. Unfortunately, many people didn't take it seriously. They felt this criminal is not going to stay in power. It still rings in my ears. The criminal is not going to stay in power. But my parents lost their jobs almost immediately because the Karstadt concern was, in quote, Aryanized. That meant everybody who was Jewish and worked there was dismissed. So instead, as I've said to my sons a number of times, I don't blame my parents, but instead of taking a rucksack and leaving Germany, my father bought another store, because this criminal wasn't going to stay in power. I couldn't go to public school anymore. I had to take a tram to a school in the city of Dortmund, a Jewish school which was a lousy school. I hated every minute of it. And this was particularly one of the reasons that my parents eventually moved to Düsseldorf, because Düsseldorf was the city where my father was born And Düsseldorf had a private Jewish school with a tremendous reputation. We had horrible situations in Applerbeck before we moved away from there. The store my father had bought was boycotted with the brown shirts and by the black shirts, and anybody who wanted to come in and buy it was a very successful store. Everything my father started was successful, but these customers were really threatened by these Nazi thugs who were boycotting the Jewish stores. Düsseldorf was wonderful for me. I loved my school, I loved my teachers, I loved my English teacher, and I made many friends. But new restrictions were coming out constantly. We couldn't go to the museums, we couldn't even swim in the Rhine River. There were signs that said so. We couldn't even sit on benches. There were signs, Jews can't sit here. And I remember during school break, we were passing by a movie house, and there were pictures advertising a film. It was a mouse playing the piano. We called that mouse the American mouse. If I were in a grade school, I would say, who was that mouse? And everybody screams, Mickey Mouse, of course. But we couldn't go in to see that movie because at the cash register it says Jews cannot enter. And then we had to adopt middle names. I was Ursula Sarah Lenneberg. That was my maiden name. My brother had to include the name Israel, and so did my father. And then there were book burnings. There were even book burnings before we came to Düsseldorf, in this place where my father was working in the department store. In the square, they had book burnings. There weren't books only by Jewish authors. There were books on the Nazi forbidden list. And the SS, the secret police, would come into Jewish homes, broke down doors, searched, and confiscated whatever they wanted to confiscate. My parents tried to immigrate to America. We did not have very close relatives, but we had a relative in Chicago. And they gave us a pledge, which is called an affidavit, which makes it possible for somebody to come to this country, because the people who give that pledge are responsible for financially for these new immigrants, so that they don't become a burden to our country. And my parents had such a pledge. But when we came to the consul after 2 years of waiting, because when you wanted to come to this country, you got a number.